Good evening. I'm actually Evelyn Summers, but I had to change my name because I got married and my husband made me. But I'm really Evelyn Summers. I'm going to be introducing this evening our Jeffrey E. Smith Editor's Prize winner in nonfiction, Janice Grill. I'd like to tell you about some of her accomplishments in a minute, but to give you a sense of what kind of writer and artist she is, her current large and half-complete project is a giant room-sized accordion book portal, hand-illuminated and inscribed with one of her essays about the history of books as magical objects. A room-sized, illuminated accordion book portal inscribed with an essay. Take a second to visualize that. And I'm sorry we don't have a PowerPoint to show you. Yesterday evening, Janice described herself to me jokingly as an existentialist materialist, and I feel it's ironic that I should be introducing her this evening because I am more a spiritual existentialist, and my relationship with the material world is uneasy most of the time. My husband can tell you that if you ask me to look at too many things on any given day, I'm likely to sink into despondence. But Janice's essay, Portals, Cabinets of Curiosity, Reliquaries, and Colonialism, is about our relationship with things. It's about materiality and materialism, but it's also about ideas. Janice writes about her, and I quote here, tendency to value the threshing and braiding of matter. But she's not hesitant to confront Descartes' dualism, or to range rather daringly from Freud's discourse on the creative power of Eros to a scholar's reflections on the nature of Christ's incarnation. I've been thinking over the past couple of days about the fact that good literature is always a surprising synthesis, and the most potent literature is synthetic in the most surprising ways. Regionalist humor, a dysfunctional family, and a sociopathic serial killer converge, and the killer slyly articulates an inverted version of the theology of Paul of Tarsus before executing everyone. That's Flannery O'Connor's A Good Man is Hard to Find. A triumphant hymn to suicide is laced with glittering and awful ornamentation of the Holocaust. That's Sylvia Plath's Lady Lazarus. The tropes of detective fiction are summoned and applied to one of the stirring controversies of late medieval British history in a book which so reinvents genre that it's been called one of the permanent classics of detective fiction. That's Josephine Tey's The Daughter of Time. Janice, too, is a master of synthesis. I think you'll see that in her reading tonight. She's an independent scholar. She's also the editor of a fledgling Burlington, Vermont magazine promoting a new ecological, political, and aesthetic movement for the Champlain Valley bioregion. Her prize-winning essay is part of a collection she just finished that explores the tension between spirit and matter in contemporary society. The book is currently called Portals, Reflections on the Spirit in Matter. You can read her comments on the challenge of finishing it in her recent Contributors on Craft blog at MissouriReview.com. Please give your attention to Janice Grill, and I promise you will be fascinated.
Hi. Thank you, Evelyn. Thank you, everyone at the Missouri Review, and thank you, Jeffrey E. Smith, wherever you are, for your generosity. Thank you all for being here. It's really an honor. So I was asked to kind of talk a little bit about the process of the essay, and then I'm going to read a little bit of the first version of it. So as Evelyn said, the essay is grappling with the challenges and the pleasures of materiality. And I wrote it as a response to what I see as sort of a dangerous rejection of the rich, meaningful, messy complexity of history and connections that can be found in material objects. This may seem strange in a society that is so glutted with useless stuff. But what I'm trying to do is to salvage meaningful matter from empty materialism and to revivify the connection between ideas, dreams, imagination, and the physical world. Nature, bodies, art, and social action. And to sort of heal that rift, that ancient rift between spirit and matter. For me, objects are portals connecting us to each other and to the good and the bad of the past and to all that humans have been curious about, have loved, have feared, desired, and dreamed about. While objects sometimes carry traces of acts and things that we might want to repress, our relationship with the material world, I hope, can actually be ethical, existentially engaged, not merely superficial, wasteful, or destructive. So, as Evelyn said, the essay explores the history of cabinets of curiosity and the craze for collection that began in the 16th century, and which was associated with voyages of discovery and colonialism. And it also explores the medieval reliquary, which is an elaborately decorative religious object that was made to house the remains of saints. So things like fingernails and bones and pieces of Christ's true cross. Both of these examples, because they are fraught with problems, serve as very juicy object lessons. So I wanted to use them to get into my own cognitive dissonance about these things, and also the cognitive dissonance I think that obtains in contemporary culture about these things, and also to redeem beauty and physicality from what I see as a sort of trend towards sterile minimalism. So, the making of the essay was also an object lesson in the relationship between ideas and materiality. I wrote it when I was staying in a beautiful 16th century French country house. And I was trying to write it, and I was also making this book. I make books, so as everyone said. So this is a little one. And so I had all the notes typed up, and I had them on my computer, but I just couldn't get to it. So I just couldn't touch it. So what I did was I found this big piece of paper, and I'm going to try to unfold this and show it to you a little bit. And if anyone wants to look at this later, you can. But so I hand wrote all the notes. And it's crazy, you know, but I just sort of hand wrote all the notes so that I could remember what I cared about. And there's like sections on iconoclasm and image veneration. This is a picture of a reliquary over here. All kinds of stuff, all the notes. And then I sort of, came back. I glued it into this book, folded it up, sort of like a map of my ideas. I don't know if I can fold this up, but I'll have to. Okay. So I put it on my desk in this beautiful house, 16th century farmhouse, and I looked at it a lot. And then I would go for my daily walks. And one day, I have to fold it because I'm going to read from the book, but anyway. One day I went out for my walk, and I came back and I wrote a letter to my friends back home in Vermont. And that letter, then I rewrote into this book, and then it became the beginning and the end of the essay. So what I'm going to do is just read a little bit from that, and it's the unrevised text that later became the essay. It's got the beginning and the end, but without revisions. So, here at the Maison Guy Sabert, where I am writing an essay on the spiritual and material properties of objects, Schatzkammer, and reliquaries, everything is a bearer of history. All of the earth, all the rocks, going back to the Paleolithic age, and the land worked and harvested here for centuries. The grapevines, the fig trees, the old stone houses with their cellars and attics. Yesterday, I worked in the garden with Francine, removing 10 years of ground cover and vines from an area outside the pressoir, so called because of the beautiful old giant wooden cask, which is a press for grapes, wine and juice which sits on its porch, and uncovering wild garlic and snails and small prodding new flowers. Everything here is bound or connected to the past via bloodlines, via deep ruts in the communal brain, like etchings on the face of the earth's memory, but going deeper to places we cannot see, but only vaguely feel. And Francine was born here in this house, and her family goes back for generations. Thus, that earth we were working was worked by her forefathers and foremothers over and over again, the same earth. In the Maison Library, which used to be a cafe where old men drank and sang together, where other kinds of vines go back to other kinds of spreading roots, bifurcating over vast geographic and disciplinary areas, ancient Greece, medieval France, 20th century German history and philosophy, Japanese courtly poetry, Arabo-Andalusian melodies. I picked up Freud's Civilization and its Discontents, wherein he writes about the way our childhood selves are carried within our grown bodies, just as the ancient foundation of old cities may be imagined to still exist somewhere beneath the new structures. And Marcel Mauss's wonderful book, The Gift, about ancient and primitive gift exchange, called the potlatch in some traditions, and about the mana of objects, and a world wherein objects are not reduced to commodities bought and sold between strangers without any emotional, social, or spiritual bonds. The mana that passes through the object is alive, and its powers increase the more it is circulated. This reminded me of the power we sense in old things, old places, and in the late offspring of old families. The problem is that these lines of power can be cut, diminished, denigrated when they are used and abused in merely mercenary ways. When an object, a place, a person is cut off from the circulating energy of community, history, nature, the lifeblood of heritage and cultural exchange, it becomes sterile and loses its mana. I'm seeing how much this needed editing, but you know. Separated from the raw materials that made it, from the craftsperson who made it, the animal and natural materials of which it is made, the inspirations it echoes, an object becomes a mere thing. A person even becomes a mere thing with no meaning. Also, a place is robbed of its ancient magic insofar as its ancient trees, hearths, foundations, tales, myths, and songs are cut down and forgotten. It is so difficult to imagine a time when humans were not driven by merely economic ends. In buying and selling, we lay waste our powers, as Wordsworth had it. But the roots of such a time are still traceable, and we may uncover them, and we may cultivate them. In another, more popular book on the gift by Lewis Hyde, it is suggested that modern people actually like the commodification of objects and life because it gives them a sense of freedom from the group. Since gift exchange is a complex and fraught relationship, often dangerous and messy, it gives them a freedom from the commonality, the family, and the tribe. Thus, the free society is not so much about political freedoms as about a social freedom, a sense of autonomous self-determination, the freedom to leave the group and fend for oneself, the non-beholdenness of the capitalist commodity exchange. Like the way one may sometimes prefer a sterile, cold hotel to the awkwardness of staying with strangers who might become friends. While cleaning up after dinner, Francine and I agree that this sort of anonymity has its charms too, for a poet or artist or any person who wants to escape for a while from everyone she knows, to live in a foreign city, unwatched, unbound, irresponsible. But here, in the awkward and comfortable warmth of the Maison Gay Saber, I am thinking of all these things and of our culture's love of and prejudice against objects, and trying to parse out the differences between matter and materialism. Obviously, it is not a mere matter of the objects themselves being different, but also of the social and the spiritual relationship obtaining among them, of the process of creating, transmitting, sharing, or treasuring them, of a ritual of exchange. Of course, good bohemians have always known how to love objects in ways that take them out of the context of the marketplace, objects that make us dream. finding treasures in junk shops and in attics. And I immediately discovered in Francine a kindred spirit of aesthetic, spiritual materiality, when she showed me lovingly her many treasures, some chipped, some torn, each one a poem in itself, each holding its own story, a past, an aroma. It strikes me that my visit here is itself an object lesson in the sort of decommodification Mauss points to, since there is no real purpose or product to speak of, besides a sort of ineffable mystical mingling of material and spiritual substances. For the material environment is very present in my intellections and musings, from the churned up, tilled fields of rich soil, to the fences woven of thin, dark rushes, to the winding wooden staircase in the 16th century house, to the warm figs and delicious soft cheeses, to the dry wood crackling in the old sooty fireplace with its cast iron grate and its old pan for roasting chestnuts and cast iron foot warmer, and the white gray ashes that must be taken out back in a pail, along with the colorful redolent food scraps and the cheese rinds for the chickens. I'm gonna waste up there. Yeah. Thank you, and I also wanted to say congratulations to my fellow prize winners, Philip and Emma.
Good evening. It's my great pleasure to introduce Philip B. Williams, winner of our Editor's Prize in Poetry. Philip is a Chicago native, a Carvey-Hannon graduate, and the author of the book of poems, Faith in the Interior, published by Alice James Books. He's currently the creative writing fellow in poetry at Emory University. There are many things I admire about the group of poems by Philip that we featured in the Missouri Review. Their emotional honesty and urgency, their rich, sweeping language and sharp precision, and their unyielding quest for deeper understanding of our human condition. These expansive, breathtaking poems explore such large issues as race, faith, the protean nature of the earth, and our human capacity to love, to empathize, and to hurt and destroy. In these poems, the sense of alienation and wonderment, loneliness and compassion go hand in hand. So do raw, naked feelings and clear-eyed insights. In a field of death and barrenness, we're also led to see that the world's revision of itself roils through the sky. On a t-shirt the speaker wears, we see not only the names of lives lost because of racism, but also the speaker's effort to gather these names there, to make them visible, and resist the erasure of an unjust history. These poems demand to be read and reread, and I'm eager to hear Philip read them tonight. Please welcome Philip Williams.
We all have all kinds of, oh, this is a good mic, hello. We all have things we're just carrying with us, several books. I'm going to begin reading from Thief in the Interior in my book. I have copies if people are interested. And then I'm going to close out reading a couple of pieces from the Missouri Review. And this is for timing myself. Sonnet with a cut wrist and flies. 1. Blade to the soft and the soft flashed open was a breakage of robins. 2. Blood dripped to the floor, splashed on the tile, painted a big toe. 3. The slit would talk back, sweet nothing in a red gown. 4, wrist, noun. The carpus or lower part of the forearm where it joins the hand to explore the joint. Window hinged on the edge of the body to slice it, to peek into the cut and find the ribbon. 5, blood veined by the rhapsodic. 6, a single mouth, its total face. 7, risk, verb, to expose to the chance of injury or loss, hazard, to risk one's life. As the mind was made enterable, a boy stepped into, was natural in him, was his, and spectacular. 8, in arteries plucked quatrains, perfected through wreckage. A man waited in the pulse. 9, a man found in the wrist who wanted out, but who put him in. 10, he spoke the 4 languages of the heart. He would touch, the boy would. 11, hurt the boy and translate his screams into a 5th vernacular. 12, the boy he entered was put into no more than an urn, than a tawdry vessel. 13, sacrifice, noun, a giving up of something valued for someone or something else considered to be of more value. The radius giving itself to the owner, the man himself hidden in the dark creases of vein rope and contraction, and arteries hierophant drum. The man, 13, stepped out of the dark and into where the cut welcomed the room's wattage. 13, stepped into the light, his face a cut, a black hyphen from which all speech. 13, from which all darkness was made legible. 13, the single mouth, his total face. 13, he would touch and call himself many names. 13, call himself a god, but he was no god. 13, but was easy to believe him a god, to walk to him, to relive how he got there. 13, stutter and suck. 13, was the sound of the cut closing in on them both to hold them there. 13, as before in the dark, when no one was around, blood wild with knowledge. 13, the man approached, was a knowledge himself, his face the one written page. 13, his option the sole option. He would take the boy, be mnemonic, be what had always been prefaced to. He reached out his hand. 14, and his fingers, thumbnail carving the boy's cheek, touched like flies. One more for the book, from the book. Durag. Oh, darling, the moon did not disrobe you. You fell asleep that way, nude and capsized by our wine, our bump and grind shenanigans. Blame it on whatever you like. My bed welcomes whomever you decide to be. Hung mistress, bride's bouquet, John Doe in the alcove of my dreams. You can quote verbatim an entire album of Bone Thugs and Harmony with your ass in the air. There's nothing wrong with that. They've meant syllables as you call me yours. You don't like me but still invite me to your home when your homies aren't near enough to hear us crash into each other like ours. Some men have killed their lovers because they loved them so much in secret that the secret kept coming out. Wife gouging her husband with suspicion, churches sneering when an usher enters. Never mind that. The sickle moon turns the sky into a man's mouth slapped sideways to keep him from spilling what no one would understand. You call me God when it gets good, though I do not exist to you outside this room. Be yourself or no one else here. Your do-rag is camouflage patterned and stuffed into my mouth. Now these poems are very long, so I'm going to possibly jump around. I'll start with the first poem that appears in this issue, which is a fantastic issue. It's beautiful. It's called The Field. If you would like to follow along, it's page 63. Let's collaborate. Let's do this. The Field. The battered field is hateful without remorse, is as seductive as what is familiar. A wild horse who long ceased being horse had become beauty itself, failing as the field has failed or someone has failed the field with overuse. the gray soil too sparse, its blonde grass and tight nubs and stiff as scimitars that jut from the earth declarations of war. The barrenness cannot feed the hares who feed the foxes who feed the bloodlust of men. There is a dead dogwood stunted in its naked reach. A storm rolls over the jagged boughs that rake the soft belly of the blackened air until lightning clarifies its scars. Scimitars could scar a belly with their sharpness, with their curves like a gleaming succubus sliding on each nerve's nylon until the harp is undone. Or the harp is played to the tune wind makes undressing in an arid field. This is love, if someone says so. A man weeps to soft music in his house, though nothing can hear him outside his window. His mouth like a ripple in a pond after a frog leaps out, then leaps back in, a word spoken by mistake that the speaker never wants to take back. The word could be like love too if broken, more broken than the shrill gate outside, swinging open then shut, obliterating entrance and exit. Here waits the God whose flute reveals and hides the way. She is mischievous with her song, coming off the rusted hinges. The gate is flanked by 2 stone pillars, both topped with pots that once held lavender, but now hold moldy soil. One sweet smell deposed by another. Rot and the bones left bare is the story of the hare and fox, while the felled horse crafts the field's ugliness, its ghost hooves crushing the ground. Let the gate squeal shut against that bestiary. The world's revision of itself roils through the sky, storm of bruised clouds, lightning and the last living beast revealed in bursts. First, its outline, next, its distant mob made clear in that moment of light, then 2 golden eyes, an abacus by which to count the days. I'll see if I can read the entirety of Blade Set to Tear Away the Good Flesh.
Yes.
Oh, mercy. Hey!
Very good.
Yes. 1. Your patience is required, but you won't be forced to give it. Not here while I'm on my knees, butt naked and trying hard to find the right words. Deskless, the fan going for noise because it's lonely on this end, and sometimes the air does touch me, and I am grateful to feel. I see my reflection in the screen and wonder who would want to touch me this way. Growing up, I thought nothing about everything. Or was it everything about nothing? Obliteration, even then, seemed more like real than what we call real. Abandoned houses, ugly on the block. The grass, ugly too, yellowed candy wrappers in its teeth. The empty lot across the street where the brown brick house burned down, then down some more. A woman and her 2 sons had lived there. We never spoke to them, my mother and I, but we went into our closets, emptied them of clothes, couldn't stop ourselves from giving everything away to that family. Call it the Lord, call it love. To this day, I own very little to put on my own body. As though being cold is some way to live, as though being naked could save a life. 2, you're not supposed to say you are thinking about suicide because people will think that you are suicidal. I have been thinking about suicide. I am not suicidal. Thank you for trusting me with myself. My friends, life is hard. It is the one job we have that we rarely do well, but it ends the same for everyone with the body. The spirit is someone else's job to consider. My grandmother gave up the ghost, as they say, in the room beneath me. Cancer, diabetes, the house creaks for her body. This is not pathetic fallacy. This is a Black household where things speak all the time that should not. And why shouldn't they? Just this morning, the floor buckled beneath my weight. The wood was some animal's home once, some tree a child climbed and maybe loved. I would cry out too for love. Isn't that what I'm doing now? I'm not supposed to write things like that or share them if I do, but this is one life I can't take and neither can you. My friend, the one with all the hair, took peel after peel after peel after peel after peel. I could go on. He didn't finish there. Why should I? And what caused him to hurt so? Why did his father watch those men do that to him? After peal, after peal, after peal, what do you say to someone death did not want? Thank you. I mortify myself thinking about a sliced thumb, a run-in with scissors teaching my skin against arrogance. But what gets me the most upset is how I have the nerve to think someone would miss me, and all this quiet life would miss me. 3. The Jewish fraternity that threw the brown-faced party on campus, where they wore wife beaters and burned votive candles of La Virgen de Guadalupe, where they wore sombreros and the girls from the sorority across the street stuffed their shirts with fake pregnancies and wore hoop earrings while binge drinking Patron and Coronas. The Jewish fraternity woke up to a Cabbage Patch doll stuffed into a toy oven. On the oven's door, a typed note, "Is this funny too?" The ways we imagine destroying each other, such flexible cruelties. I speak to a man who looks like he could be my brother every morning, and all he can do is glare. To be bare in aloneness, when being alone with someone can be a terror equal to or beyond that of seeing your reflection flashing in and out of the hood of a car, the heat of it less lover than someone you've never met, who won't move, won't remove their heavy foot from your neck, your cheek turned so you don't even see yourself, making the face only humility can break from you. And I can't tell which happens that causes the man to not speak back to me, that he hates seeing himself in me, or that he doesn't see himself in me, which means he's never truly seen himself. It could be neither. More than likely just narratives I throw over his face, unlike a veil, but holy water, icy, blinding, to wash him away. And then I'll close out with something from the book, which is not happy.
Unlike the last one.
Unlike the last one. These poems are paradise, I swear. I'll read the last poem, Birth of the Doppelganger. A wolf's entrails opened and I stepped into them. I stepped into the jowls of the dead, into the stench. Flies scoured the decayed innards like priests washing temple walls. It was ecstatic. The flipped over car, wolf teeth shining from gum swale above tongue, behind cheek, after blood spilled and my car spilled into all hell spilled, and you want to know what the taste was like? I tell you, at the crash's wake was a new life. My new self bled out from the old self. I left behind a husk pricked by daggers of wood and lungs drunk off exhaust. Saw the one eye left in the split skull, watch my skin roll up like pantyhose, over the bones, over pristine muscle, blood hot and fresh. I walked away from car and corpse and made room for nothing but this body's first words. See my mouth move like this? Thank you.
Hi, I'm Ann Barngruber, the contest editor. I send out a lot of emails. I'm here to introduce Emma Turge. At an intense moment of self-inflicted risk and anger and danger in Emma Turge's short story, The Wall, our narrator Miri, declares to us readers, I had just two options, backward or forward. Although Miri is speaking of a literal predicament here, her words also resonate metaphorically to the choices she's made throughout the story, and perhaps more importantly, the choices that were made for her without her consent or knowing. Like so many other great stories that can't quite escape us, The Wall begins with unbearable losses of a brother, a voice, an identity, of innocence, youth, and faith. Miri is thrust into an impossible situation that brings her to her knees and forces her to question the true vulnerability of prayer. And yet, This story also begins with so much hope of a new love, new voice, a new identity, and perhaps even a new kind of faith that looks nothing like what Mary has ever experienced before. Insightful, funny, heartbreaking, clever, honest, and searing, Emma Tour's The Wall provides a fresh and unique vision to a universal human story as old as the Western Wall of Jerusalem itself. Emma George's fiction has been published in such acclaimed journals as Plowshares, The Threepenny Review, Narrative, and Cincinnati Review, among many others. She is a recipient of a 2015 O. Henry Prize, a 2015 Minnesota Emerging Writers Grant, and fellowships from the Gentil, U-Cross, and Willapa Bay residencies. She holds an MFA in fiction from the University of Montana, and she currently lives in Minneapolis, Minnesota, where she is at work on a novel. I also have to add that she has an amazing taste in shoes, which you'll soon see. We are so happy and honored to have her with us here in Columbia this weekend to have her read from her brilliant work. Please join me in welcoming our 2015 Editor's Prize in Fiction, Prize winner in fiction, Emma George.
I feel so bad for all of you that can't see my amazing shoes. They're very colorful. Thank you so much to the Missouri Review. I'm so honored to be honored by you tonight and all the lovely people I've met here. And I'm so honored also to be in the company of Philip and Janice. Really such a pleasure to get to know you both and to read your work in this context, or any context. It's great either way. Let me just find it. I'm keeping my bookmark as my own photo booth. Little narcissism. Okay, so I'll just read sort of from the beginning of the story, which is, for those of you who want to follow along, on page 93. This is very loud, Philip is right. After my brother Jonah's funeral, I didn't fly home with my parents. Instead, I stayed behind with Ava in her shoebox apartment in Tel Aviv and spent a couple nights learning to go down on her, an act that felt surprisingly natural once I got used to the right-up closeness of it. I'd never been with another woman before, but we didn't talk about that. Mostly we were quiet or talked about Jonah. Though Ava and I had met for the first time at his funeral, she'd been serving with him for over a year, and he'd shown me many pictures of the two of them in their sand green IDF uniforms, their arms slung around one another's shoulders in the casual way of soldiers everywhere. In emails, he'd referred to her breezily as my best bud, but when he'd come home on leave the last time, he'd gotten uncharacteristically wasted on a 12-pack of High Life and said to me, I can't stand it, Mary. I want her so badly I can't pray, I can't sleep. I'm on my knees asking God to either turn her straight or gun her down so I don't have to look at her anymore. And then I spend all night begging forgiveness for thinking such fucked up shit. Before Ava, I had never seen my 23-year-old brother in love, or even in lust, which I had pop psychologized as a reaction to the trauma of his puberty. He'd dreaded its coming for years, even before the physical changes began. He was terrified of losing his voice. And I was frightened too. Just a year and a half older than he, I'd grown up to the sound of his blue sky treble floating around our house, the foresty trill of arpeggios from behind his bedroom door, and I was used to a life organized by his choir practice and performances. He'd been singing since he was 4 years old and had been gifted in the oldest sense of the word, as if a hand had reached down and pressed light into his throat. We'd both been raised by secular Jews, but Jonah was raised by his choir as well and was a believer. He'd been raised on music steeped in God. The Christian God, I'd argued once, home freshman year of college for winter break. I was sitting at our kitchen table watching him blend peanut butter and bananas into ice cream, as always working tirelessly against his twiggy teenage metabolism. All those old songs are about Jesus. It's got nothing to do with words, Jonah said over the screech of the blender. I didn't listen to the words, I listened to the feeling. He was 17 then and had known for several years that his voice was never coming back. He could still sing better than most, but his tone was uneven, his range stilted, all the buttercup richness graveled down. His coach had told our parents there were some boys who never came to terms with the change, never figured out how to handle their new instrument, and gently he recommended that Jonah begin to see a therapist instead, to address the mind behind the larynx. But by that time, he was beginning to lift weights and had subbed out choir practice for the temple and the gym, and my parents figured he was moving on. All praise music, all worship music, it's the music that tells you what the song's about, said Jonah, pouring his viscous beige shake into a glass. The lyrics are just a key like on a map, a compass rose, but you don't need the idea of north if you know which way is up. He took a sip of his drink, his corded neck contracting and releasing. This new body of his called attention to itself in a way that frightened me. The popping veins, the hammy arms swinging from bricked shoulders, the pulse beating beneath the stretched tight skin of his temple, all of it a constant, unwelcome reminder of human meatiness. Only his face was the same as it had always been. Narrow, alert, a delicacy about his mouth like he was holding a diamond on the tip of his tongue. He'd begun wearing a knitted black kippah, and the whole effect, the jacked up body, the little Jewish head, was disconcerting. You weren't this religious when you were actually singing, though, I said. Why now? He sat down across from me. God gave me my voice, he said, and then he took it away. Think about it, Miri. Why would he do that? Punishment, I said. No, said Jonah, and he'd made a swishing side-to-side motion with his hand, almost like the Queen's wave. Redirection. I have a new compass now. I didn't know it at the time, but his compass was already set east, towards the Israeli army, and that very spring he made Aliyah to Israel and became a Chayal Boded, a lone soldier. At his funeral 4 years later, I saw the phrase written down in English characters for the first time and realized it wasn't loan as I'd always thought of it, like we were loaning Jonah out and would get him back eventually, but loan like only, like a loan. The night after Jonah's funeral, Ava came to my hotel room while my parents were out. It was the first time I'd seen her out of uniform. She was Israeli but of Russian-American descent and was as blonde and pale-eyed as an Iowa farm girl, though slight rather than sturdy. Her short curls were wild outside the confines of her green cap, and as a civilian, she was wearing Chuck Taylors and boys' skinny jeans, like a beautiful, clear-skinned version of the skaters I'd had crushes on in junior high. We sat pressed close together on my parents' enormous hotel bed and watched the videos of Jonah that Ava had shot with her phone. She said, I know some people won't want to look so soon, but I brought them just in case. And I said, I want to see anything you have. The videos were small on the phone screen, but the sound was clear and very loud, and the first voice from the speakers was Jonah's. He was speaking Hebrew, a language I'd only heard him use during prayer, never like this in everyday life, sitting on a stone wall in his uniform and chatting to someone just beyond the screen. Ava tried to translate. He says, does anyone have a pen? But I shushed her. I wanted to hear only Jonah. Better, maybe, that I couldn't understand him. The sound of his voice alone had lined my eyes with tears. He was laughing, tan, dusty. Coke commercial happy, the way you want your loved ones to look in memory. A black-nosed machine gun was hanging at his side, loose and casual like I'd carry a purse, and behind him I could see the turrets of Old Jerusalem and the golden gleam of the Dome of the Rock. Another soldier had come into the picture to hand him a pen and a small pink notepad. She was narrow as a dart and moved in flutters. I vaguely recognized her from the funeral, remembered her dark hair sticking to her tear-wet face like a net. That's Noah, Ava whispered, her lips nearly touching my ear. She likes your brother. Look, it's so obvious. Noah was flickering her fingers through the ends of her ponytail, and I saw that she couldn't meet Jonah's eyes when he spoke to her, though she was smiling, close-mouthed and nervous. For a moment, I let myself spin my brother's life out past the frame of the camera. Noah in white, shards of wedding glass beneath their feet, a faux Bauhaus apartment in Tel Aviv, and a yarmulke toddler with a serious brown face and Jonah's lost little eyes. But even had he lived, that life was only fiction. He was looking uncaringly beyond Noah, at the camera, at Ava. I was crying, and Ava took my hand to squeeze it tightly. I felt so heavy, drowning in silty water. Yet at her touch, I felt, too, the lifting of my lungs, a surface-focused surge between my legs, the lightness that comes from desire, from wanting something. I thought simultaneously, this feeling means I'll be okay, and this feeling means I'm lost forever. The contradiction made me dizzy. What is he writing, I said, in part to distract myself, on that little pink paper? A prayer, Ava said, for the wall. What do you mean, what wall? The Western Wall, Ava said. Come on, you know this wall. In Jerusalem? What kind of prayer? It's custom, she said, to write a prayer and put it in the wall, in between the stones. If you go and look, you can see all the cracks are filled with paper. What did Jonah pray for? Ava lifted one shoulder and looked down at our hands, still intertwined. He didn't say. You know, it's private. When was this? A week or so ago, a few days before the accident. We were talking over the recording of Jonah, and I felt a pang of guilt for muffling his voice. When he'd been sad, he'd always wanted silence, but I was unlike him in that regard. What I wanted was to hear everything, to know what was running through Jonah's inscrutable head in his last days, whether he knew they were his last days, whether he was happy, miserable, yearning. I wanted to know what he had prayed for at the end. I wanted a window beyond the screen. I wanted that piece of paper. Ava leaned into me, her shoulder warm and strong, while off-screen she laughed, the camera shaking up and down. I leaned back into her and stared at my brother's pixelated hands, now folding up that slip of pink, his words disappearing within the pleats. When Ava kissed me a while later, I couldn't tell if I was stealing Jonah's dearest wish or granting it. Thank you.
Hi there, I'm Spear Morgan, TMR's editor. Thank you everyone for coming out tonight. And thanks to Jeffrey Smith for endowing this prize each year. And thanks especially to the winners, Janice and Emma and Philip. Their pieces were 3 of 3,100 entries to the prize, which was a new record for us. And I also want to thank Anne for running the contest for 2 years and doing such a wonderful job, and to Schwen for being the poetry editor for 2 years. She's going off to her new job. And I want to thank the Columbia Office of Cultural Affairs for their kind support for this reception. And to the musicians, Jesus Gomez and Renan LeMay. And I want to really strongly thank our board, Trish Miller, Chris Brayman, Lisa Safran, Peggy Poe, Beth Hussey, Janet Marsh, Michelle Proctor, and Jeff Files. And to our great group of interns. Every semester we have between 20 and 30 interns, and they help us respond to the 12 to 14,000 entries that we get a year for publication in the Missouri Review. Our internship attracts students from all over, and now they're coming from other campuses to serve for a semester or a summer or whatever as an intern. I was just in New York over spring break, visiting several who have gone on to work for major publishing houses there, and they all comment on how valuable their experience working for the magazine was for them and their careers. TMR is known for boosting the careers of writers, especially writers early in their career, because we are a totally open magazine, because we have a powerful internship and good readers, and because we have learned to train them and help them with the reading. We're able to be a truly old-fashioned, open literary magazine, which is pretty amazing. It's very hard to do because it requires thousands of hours of work. And in the process, we've published, for example, over 25 Pulitzer Prize winners, many of them their first piece. And that's just one of many examples of prize winners and all that. So it's a magazine that really works. Also want to mention the Miller Audio Prize, which was endowed by Trish Miller, and which this year had over 800 submissions, which is 3 times last year's submissions, and that prize continues to grow. Look for the winning submissions on our website, which, by the way, gets over 1 million hits a year, so the website is widely viewed as well. I also want to mention, in closing, that we're kicking off our fundraising campaign, and Janice mentioned the business about some people wanting to, you know, the whole thing of giving and the complexity of giving, all that. You know, sometimes it's a pain, and you wonder, do I want to get tangled up in all that? Well, if you use this Mizzou Give Direct, it's very easy. We didn't plan this. MizzouDirect.missouri.edu. And you can give any amount, $1 up. You can give monthly, whatever, and it's totally easy to do and totally safe. And your support will ensure that the Missouri Review can have another great 4 decades. So I urge you to consider a donation. But meanwhile, please stick around tonight and have another glass of wine and talk to our authors.
Yeah.
Thanks again for coming.